Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard-to-explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Carrie Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
I have a question about, you mentioned the word witch hunt earlier in regards to the Harvard president. I have a question, or I'm curious to talk a little bit about this idea that you present in the book, which is you constantly being asked if you're a witch, right? Unmarried, is naming God as a Black woman, right? And I love that. I think that's hysterical and funny. And also, would it be so bad if you were a witch? Honestly, right? The word witch comes from a word that means wisdom, right? Essentially, so it was the historical meaning from the word witch is of wisdom, right? Of women's wisdom in particular. So I'm curious to know why you think so much of women's wisdom traditions are relegated, and especially I think the association of Blackness with and darkness with evil, right? Why those things are automatically shoved aside. And I think it's a very systemic thing, right? I think it's a very systemic thing. If it is it of the feminine divine and is it of Blackness, then we will call it evil, right? So can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, I think it has to do with just who's been the holder of history and knowledge. There's a West African proverb about something like, Pastor David, you might know it more closely than I do, but something like, if the hunter always tells the story, then then the hunter is always the hero of the story or whatever. It's like the lion, whatever, Right. But I mean, even if you look at research on, the sacred feminine, particularly the sacred Black feminine, these historians from 1700s, 1800s who were doing who were studying ancient civilizations kept calling them cults, like the goddess cults, which is so interesting, as if it's this, because the way we associate in modern, I mean, even going back to the 1700s, a cult was kind of a fringe. It's the same as it is now, right? It's a fringe.
Yes.
It's what are you talking about? These religions were as grandiose, as deeply integrated in society as Islam, Judaism, Christianity. They were the religions of the day. They were institutional religions. But even just the way it's been talked about is it's a couple of women getting naked under the moon and it's running
right and dancing.
These were complex socio-theological communities with their own morals and understandings of science and institutions of higher learning. And it's just so interesting. So I think part of it is just who's been running things forever.
You are that lion. It's until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero of the story.
Yeah.
And Christena, you're
telling the story.
You're telling the story.
I'm a Leo, sun, moon, and rising. So
I'm a triple Leo.
Wow. I was talking with someone about that the other day, and who knows a lot about, astrology. And she was like, wow, you're so grounded for a Leo. I'm like, because being grounded is my part-time job. That's why I'm grounded. In me, that's naturally grounded.
We want to talk about, we want to get to, your projects now, your work now, but there's somebody else's work where you stood out to me. I mean, I think it's the book by Kelsey Blackwell. Decolonizing the body, healing body-centered practices for women of color to reclaim confidence, dignity, and self-worth. And you wrote the foreword to that. And I just thought, Christena's never been better than when she wrote this. And so I just have one excerpt here that I think is as compelling as anything I've read of yours. I met Kelsey just 2 months after I quit my job as a professor at Duke University, a plantation-like work environment with a towering campus chapel that boasted a life-size statue of Robert E. Lee among the Judeo-Christian saints. I, like Harriet Tubman, had awakened to the reality that I was simply too sacred to remain enslaved any longer. Now I was finally ready to prioritize my embodied wisdom over the head knowledge I had acquired through my many years in academia. There was just one problem. I didn't know how to connect with my body, much less its wisdom. For as I would come to learn through the teachings of Kelsey, getting off the plantation is as much an internal process as it is an external process. And this kind of, relates to what Carrie was asking earlier about embodiment. So how did that pop into your spirit, connecting to Kelsey's work?
Yeah. A suspect white lady actually told me about the organization through which I met Kelsey. But because she's suspect, I never really connected with the organization because I was like, if this lady's recommending it, But then I moved to Oakland and ended up moving into an apartment that was 4 blocks from the headquarters of this organization. And so I went to the website and they were offering a class just for BIPOC folks led by Kelsey. So I thought this is supposed to happen. So I signed up for it. And so, the organization itself it has its pros and cons. I've learned a lot through it, but it's mostly white. But I was able to learn with Kelsey. And then since then, I've just learned she has her own work. And I did a cohort just for women of color with her. And I've done a bunch. Yeah, she's an incredible teacher, but I recommend her. But it was right place, right time, really. It was like, okay, here I am. I'm finally free to do this work. Like I don't have a job. And it's literally a 4-block walk. I don't even have to find parking. Like, why don't I just do this? And then it changed my life. The embodiment practices that she introduced me to and then nurtured really over the next several years. And that was the fall of 2019. So, the nice thing about the pandemic, at least for me, was, having all that time in isolation. I was living alone. I could do a lot of online embodiment work. That's kind of how I spent my days. And so I came out of the pandemic a really different person than I went into it.
I think a lot of people did. In the book, you tell a beautiful story that I resonated with because I have a similar experience about being in an embodiment practice and being invited to, rather than, and I think it may have been meditation actually, but rather than trying to clear your mind of thoughts, to allow the floodgates to open. And you were just blown over by this overwhelming sense of love. And that experience, as I read that, I was like, oh, I know that experience. It's a powerful experience. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, about that experience, because I think when we talk about mysticism and contemplation and an embodied faith, I think there are a lot of people who crave that and don't know what it is when they're experiencing it, right? And or how to possibly access it if they've not experienced it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if this is just my personality or not, but I do well with containers. And so in that instance, I had read a book by Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes, and I actually also cite in my book called Too Heavy a Yoke, Black Women and the Burden of Strength. And in the book, I was like crying at the introduction. I was like, oh, she's talking about me. And it was, again, right place, right time. And in that book, she said, if you want to heal for being a strong Black woman, go to mindfulness meditation. Now, this is 2014. I almost knew nothing about mindfulness. 10 years ago, nobody was really talking about it except for like weird Buddhists, And then also, I grew up Kojic. So my mom would always be like, meditation, that's for people who don't trust Jesus or, just stuff like that. So even though I'm an adult, it's like you carry these things with you, these suspicions. But I was like, Dr. Shanique was set to go, so I'm going to go. And so I signed up for this class. And I think it was just through the practices and just being present to the practice. At first I was like, I don't know if you've ever been in a mindfulness class, there's the common first exercises to eat a raisin mindfully. And you're supposed to like savor it and you're supposed to smell it and imagine the like grape that it came from and the person who watered the vine and all the things. And it's like kind of a lovely exercise. And it's also kind of just like, all that confirms is I don't like raisins. You know what I mean? It's not nearly as like magical as it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? So oftentimes you show up at these events and you're just like, I think what you said, Carrie, resonates where you're like, am I supposed to be like having a magical moment? Because I'm not.
Right. Right.
But I think what those practices do, it's a practice, right? It's not a perfect. And so you just keep doing them. And over time it grows and you start to find the experiences that resonate with you. You start to find the practice and you have to try on a lot of different things. But a lot of it too is just practice. And I just remember it was towards the end of that first mindfulness class that I took. So maybe 8 weeks into practice. And like I said, container is good for me. I like to have homework and accountability because I just won't do it. And that's when we had a retreat, an all-day retreat. And that was my first all-day retreat. And that's when, I had this, she said, the practice is to like clear your mind and just be present to your breath. But then towards the end of the day, she said, let's open the floodgates. Let's let the thoughts come in. And I just, this was 2014. I was literally getting on a plane like that night to go out to California to preach at this like evangelical mega church. And I was like, my sermon is going to be the bomb. Like all this good prayer I've done all day. God's going to, I was still in that like very algebraic faith. Like if I do this, God will do that. I deserve this, but only if I do that.
I like that term, algebraic faith.
Yeah. I suck at algebra. Really bad.
So, but what I encountered when I let the floodgates come was not this like deep sermon wisdom that I was going to like dazzle the like San Jose evangelicals with, but really just love. And it was so astounding to me because I'm such a recovering perfectionist, recovering strong Black woman. I'm very attuned to the pain in this world. I was born, caring about justice. And so it never occurred to me that at the heart of reality, when I clear everything away, is love. I thought it would be like a battle or a test or like a purgatory mountain or like something.
Yes, something where you had to prove yourself but your worth, right? Yes.
Additional waves of love, and so forceful. I was just like, okay, so if this is there and I can access it today, then it's always available. It's just a matter of clearing the pipes and finding a way to connect. And so that kind of sent me on a journey of identifying, what are the spiritual practices that are going to be the portal, and I think it's different for everyone. For me, it's, contemplative walking. I still have a practice where at least once a week, I'm out all day walking because 2 hours in, I'm present. It takes 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm finally there. And it's like, okay,
yes.
Now we can get somewhere. And now we can work with what is.
Insight.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Insight, questions, fears come up. And I'm like, ooh, I know that
was there.
Yeah. Let's unpack that.
So you mentioned you were on a retreat and you have a retreat coming up that we want to definitely talk about. So please tell us.
We only have 3 more spots. I'm so excited.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. I had no idea. So yes, I'm taking Black women to the Black Madonnas of Paris. And when I first launched this, I had no idea if there were going to be enough Black women to do the thing. And everyone was saying, you have to open it up to white women because white women are the only people who will do this. And I was just like, bless them, but I am not cut out for taking white women around to the Black Madonnas. I may do something for the white women who are in my Patreon community because they're sort of vetted. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But for now, I'm just taking Black women. And so, yeah, in May, we're taking Black women to the Black Madonnas in the Paris area. I'm so excited. We only have 3 spots left. So if anyone who's listening is interested, now's the time to sign up. But it's going to be really, really fun. We're going to go see 4 Black Madonnas. We're going to make macaroons. We're going to learn how to make macaroons. We're going to have like a luxury picnic at the Eiffel Tower. We're going to have like Black women's yoga, like easy yoga though. I don't believe in hard yoga. We're going to do like a Black women's history tour of Paris. I mean, just a time to be sacred together and to connect with our sacredness through the Black Madonnas of the Paris area. So
amazing. Yeah. So we're going to be sure to include a link to that in the show notes as well as your Patreon. So people can know how to connect with you.
Yeah. Patreon's such a wonderful way to support my work. I actually just came back from a research trip to France because I'm working on a new book on the Black Madonna. And it's like, I wouldn't be able to do things like that without my Patreon community support. But I was able to actually uncover some pretty awesome stories that like, you just have to talk to people to get them, you know, like you have to just go. There are no books that have these stories.
Oh, that's amazing. Now I can't wait to read that book. When does that book come out?
I don't know. I have to write it. I'm finishing the proposal this month. I'm guessing it'll come out in 2025.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we've touched on some of the nexus of where you and I, Christena, have, had some experience. And another way that we've both been influenced. I was ordained in the Foursquare Church. Mm-hmm. And I know that you have drawn on that.
Yeah, my uncle, Paul Hackett.
Yes.
Was Foursquare. Mm-hmm.
He was like a big deal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm telling you, this pedigree is pretty ridiculous. I don't know what to say. I'm just part of this family.
Yeah. I mean, he was, as far as Black folks go, Black preachers go, he was the guy for a long time. Mm-hmm. Now, what are your reflections now of that whole journey?
I have sorrow and gratitude. Both.
Me too.
Like everything else, I'm ambivalent. Yeah. My friend Grace Jisum Kim, who's a Korean theologian, Korean liberation theologian, she just wrote a book that I was happy to endorse. So I don't know when it comes out because I just sent the endorsement in probably a few months. But it's called I forget what it's called now, but it's basically about how like God became white in Christianity. Mm-hmm. And she's like a hardcore theologian and historian. So she does a really good job of laying, just really like making it play. Like this is what happened. Yeah. And I wrote in my endorsement, I wish the people who had purported to be my shepherds had read this book.
Yeah.
And I say that for all of people of all races in all the churches. And so I'll tell you, no romantic partner has ever broken my heart like the church did. I've never been devastated by any human being the way that the church, when I finally was aware of how much they lied to me about who God is and who I am. Yep.
Would you say also they lied about their willingness to change?
And I'm willing, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because sometimes people are like, gosh, like you really don't, you really like love to talk about like how much the church has harmed. And I'm like, yeah, but I have a unique experience in that I was literally the head house nigger of the church. I wrote a book on healing across differences in the church. It was widely read. It would be hard to find an evangelical pastor who hasn't been impacted by my work, and they still voted for Trump, right? So it's like I've seen up close and personal who people really are. And I remember there's this big Christian organization called Young Life that's like youth organization. And a couple of years ago, I think during the pandemic, some queer folks were trying to make Young Life reckon with its homophobia. And they know that I have connections to that group. So they reached out to me and they said, will you be our figurehead? Like, will you take our demands to the board? Like, we know you have them all in your phone. Like, will you kind of be the spokesperson? And I said, I'm not really in the business of doing that kind of stuff anymore, but I bless you. Yeah. And I said, but I'll just say that I personally know all their senior leadership and their board, and you're asking them to do better. And I know for a fact that they can't. So that's another reason why I'm not going to do it. But I'm the person I know for a fact that they can't. Like I've been in those meetings. I've taught, and so I worked really hard and thought, oh, if they just understood. So I wrote a book about the social psychology behind it. If they just understood. Oh, if they just saw the connection to the cross. So then I did a bunch of speaking on that. Oh, they just saw that Jesus was Black. And so I wrote about that. And it's like, no, at some point, it's just willful ignorance.
It is. Yep. I think maybe like an abusive partner.
Totally. 100%.
And keeps coming back saying, I'll never do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
For me, it's the gaslighting. For me, it's and I've had different experiences, but I've had, as somebody who has been on staff at a church, led by a powerful, it was essentially a family business, and deeply embedded in the Willow Creek, family of power. And being a woman on staff at a church like that, the gaslighting and the ways in which I was told I shouldn't be feeling what I was feeling, that it was somehow, I'm, if I don't like it, I should just leave. That was one of. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, I mean, that was a pastor told me if I don't like it, I should just leave. I'm like, wow, thank you so much for that pastoral care. Yeah. I so appreciate it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, it's that gaslighting, I think, that is also so deeply harmful.
Yeah. And so, I feel that's why I feel like my reflections are like, a lot of sorrow, more sorrow now than rage. I definitely had my rage era. But also I will say I have a lot of gratitude, because over time I've recognized that it's really patriarchal to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's that divine feminine wisdom doesn't do that. Divine feminine wisdom is about reweaving, is about upcycling, is about taking the things that people have thrown away and finding like really like genius uses for them.
Composting,
exactly, right. And so I've that's just that awareness has chastened me.
That gives me so much hope.
Thinking, yeah. But then also, like, the more I my siblings who are still very much part of that world, they've noticed how different I've become. Because the more I've moved along my own deconstruction journey and reclamation journey, the less I've needed, and the more I've gotten in touch with my inner authority, the less I've needed other people to affirm that what I'm doing is good. And that has freed me to be less controlling about other people. I mean, my first instinct when I went down this path was to turn around and shame everybody else into being on this path with me. to shame the people who shamed me.
Yeah.
Or to take the moral high ground. And I still, of course, I still have impulses to do that I'm still like divesting from. But I think both my siblings would say that I've changed so much and I've released a lot of that, mainly because I don't feel like I need to be their God. And I've released them to their God.
You know, next week, Carrie and I are going to be interviewing Frank Schaeffer.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just remember when we had him speak, to our church maybe about 2 years ago. And I remember when I told some people that we're going to be having Frank Schaeffer, one of the guys goes, he's got a really sharp edge. They were a little worried,
Mm-hmm.
But then he came on and he was just like everybody's favorite grandfather, what I mean? And so that's what I thought of when you just mentioned, your journey. I think that's, that's what happens to us, right? We're fighting our way through and we end up elbowing people on our way out. And then we look back when we're finally out and saying, well, maybe I didn't need to punch him that hard,
Yeah. Well, like the world's inherently violent. And so getting free from violence, I think I've had to just sort of make peace with the fact that any impulse that I have to do it perfectly is like a purity impulse. It's like a white supremacist impulse. Like we live in a broken world and I'm trying to get free from some of the brokenness. And there's going to be collateral damage. And also love is enough. Love is enough to help me go back and make amends. Love is enough to let people handle it on their own.
Yes.
Love is enough,
When you said that about that, the divine feminine doesn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, but does, upcycles and composts and all of that beautiful stuff, that gives me so much hope for the justice movements in general, right? Because I see so much of somebody I saw, and we're running out of time, so I'll try to be quick, but somebody I said something like one of the worst things about the movement of justice is that we're notoriously bad at self-organizing in some cases, right? Not always, not all cases, but in some cases, in that there's all of these different people, all of these different groups of people working toward justice, but we can't seem to organize to such a degree to make really positive impact. That is a gross overstatement, overgeneralization, of course, but it gives me hope because one of the things that I have experienced is a sort of trying to eating of our own, right? Like of all of us trying to work toward the same thing, and yet we get angry at each other, and it stops the work. It stops the work, right? And I'm interested in the work. I'm interested in doing my own healing and healing the world, right? I don't want to live angry all the time, And so when you said that, it gave me so much hope. So I would love for you to maybe close us out with some final words of what your experience of the divine feminine and the Black Madonna in particular has for the world and moving the world closer to justice. What words of wisdom do you have for us?
Yeah, well, what's been coming to mind through these last few minutes of conversation, I'll share because I think it relates. In 2010, right after I resigned from my job at Westmont, that was the first job I resigned from. I resigned from many jobs. Another connection that Pastor David and I have is to David Daniels.
I was going to mention him.
Who's my godfather, and he's also a God in Christ bishop. And he's a distinguished Black church historian at
Yes, he was my external reader for my dissertation.
Yeah. So we have that connection as well. And Uncle David told me after I quit Duke, he was like, the word on the street is that if you're a racist and you hire Christena, she will leave. And so I had just resigned from my first job at Westmont at this time, and I went and I did a summer fellowship at Seattle Pacific University on gender and Christianity. And while I was there, I met a woman who was at the time the provost at Gonzaga. So a major Catholic university. And this is a woman who somehow was a provost. So I met with her for lunch and I just said, how do you do it? Like, you're here in this like fellowship with us talking about like real gender issues. So clearly you're like aware, yet you like your whole life is this like misogynistic institution, both Gonzaga and also the Catholic Church. And I was like, how do you do it? She's like, oh, the bishops will die.
Wow.
And I just remember thinking, that's so flippant and morbid at the same time.
Our meditation for the day.
Yes. I was thinking, are you planning a hit on the bishops?
Yeah, like, is there something I need to know?
And but as she unpacked it, and as I've come to understand, because this was almost 15 years ago now, she put the bishops in their place. They are going to die. They will not have the last word. They're out there doing things, and it seems big, and it seems like they have all the control, but she was tapped into a deeper reality. And she was weaving towards that deeper reality.
Thank you for
and
that.
That's what I mean about the divine feminine. Like, she was able to see the work I'm doing will outlast the bishop's work.
Yes.
This is how, and I think, and I have no idea how connected she is to the Black Madonna. I'm assuming she is, because most dope Catholic women I know are connected to the Black Madonna. But I don't personally know if that's true for her. But if you look at these stories about the Black Madonnas and how no matter what patriarchy did, they're still here. They're still amongst the people. No matter how much patriarchy tried to co-opt them, like, so many Black Madonnas were targets of violence because the French aristocracy had co-opted them. So when the revolution happened, people were like, Madonnas are associated with the French. The Black Madonnas have been co-opted. Supposedly some of the Black Madonnas are called warriors because they were co-opted to support the Crusades. Yeah. Talk about being used and abused. Talk about your personhood and your words and your vision and your mission being manipulated, usurped, right? And yet, every single time, the village people are like, we know who she really is. And we're holding on to that. And they're still here, often because the village people would, rescue them. I tell a story in my book about how the village people literally pieced one back together, right? There's so many stories like that. And so I think to me, the fact that the Black Madonna goes back to the earliest spiritualities means something to me. Not in terms of dominance, not in terms of like, and therefore everybody should believe in her, but just in terms of like, I've been here. I've been doing things. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm always available. And I'm reading this book, Timefulness, right now. That's about the history of the earth through a geological lens. And it's really beautiful because this geologist is talking about how unfathomably old the earth really is and how we can start to map that through rocks. And she said, this gives us hope. She's like, we're going through all this climate crisis right now. And yes, we need to be on high alert about that. But she said, but I take hope in the fact that I understand that the earth has been here for a long time and it's not fickle. The earth has lots of things. Even in the midst of climate crisis, I'm able to fall back on that hope as I continue to work for healing. And as soon as I read that, I put in my notes on my Kindle, that's the Black Madonna. She's been here. And this is not a fickle God. This is not a fickle being. She can handle the tough questions. She can handle doubt. She can handle disbelief. She can handle the toxicity that we organizers have amongst each other, and she can help us work it out. I actually have a chapter in my new book on the Black Madonna and intergenerational healing. And so like, I just am like, you know what? The bishops will die. The Black Madonna won't.
I'm going to put a sticky note on my wall that says the bishops will die. And that's just,
there's a verse in the Psalms that's like, man will wither away like grass.
I love it.
Interesting.
Yes.
Like, it's interesting how many times I'll hear something and be like, that's dope. And then I'll just be like, oh, I memorized that when I was like at Awana as a kid.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we get ready to close, you know, these atrocities, you know, Gaza, Tigray, Congo, Sudan, these atrocities seem to be having the last word in this moment, that this is the character of our species and the fate of the planet. But when you say the bishops will die, I'm maybe reading a little bit more here into that. What do you see, if there's, you know, some modicum of hope in this? What do you see for the future of all of us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the reason why they're getting the last word is because we are not embodying the Black Madonna. I think that the Black Madonna shows up most powerfully through us, through our community organizing, through our voices. But we can't really speak powerfully if we're not grounded. And so if we're only speaking out of fear, if we're only speaking out of crisis, if we're only speaking out of like reactivity, then yeah, it's not really we're not gonna be sowing seeds for a different future. But I think if we do the work of grounding ourselves in a spirituality it, you know, it could be, for me, it's the Black Madonna. I'm like, find something that works for you. You know
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and I hear within and around what you're saying, but can you just break that down, the idea of the Black Madonna, for somebody who might be listening, who is Jewish, who is Muslim, who is Buddhist, who is, you know, Sikh or whatever, you know, break that down for them.
Love. What's your renewable resource of love in your faith tradition? Always available. I mean, one of the things I love about Black Madonnas is that they're often associated with fountains or springs. And these are springs that have been running for thousands of years. So I think every spirituality that is rooted in love has a pathway to that spring, multiple pathways to that spring. And for me, the question is, are my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors coming out of a place of fear? Or are my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors coming out of a place of love? And I can't do anything about Gaza if all I do is watch Al Jazeera and fight with people on the internet, and I'm not spending any time at my altar. I'm not spending any time in the woods connecting to that source of love. I'm not spending any time with my beloveds who help nurture that connection to love. I'm not spending any time in gratitude practices. Right? I spend so much time just connecting to abundance so that any actions that I do towards justice come out of that spring, rather than all the resource scarcity and clamor of fear. Because Pastor David, you're right. It sounds like the final word is coming from all the people not people, I'm going to say institutions, systems that are poisonous. And I have to keep reminding myself throughout the day, every day, that that's not the final word, that there's a deeper word. And
that's a mic drop.
It's that together, right? I mean, I could never have written the book that I wrote if I wasn't. This is not a book that you write just because you want to. This is a book that you write because you have done the work of connecting with abundance and love. and then the work comes out of that, whatever the work is, right? Not everybody needs to write a book, but your version of the work is going to come out of that fountain of love.
That is also exactly what I know I needed, because in so many of the spaces that especially online spaces, what I've been hearing from some people, not everybody, is that if you're celebrating a holiday, then you're not a true supporter of the Palestinian people who, and I sit here and I go, how does me having less joy in my life do anything to save any life anywhere? Right? I both can be true. I can care deeply and embody activism and also experience joy in whatever ability I have to experience joy. That me existing in a dearth or a lack of joy does not bring more joy and peace and sovereignty for oppressed people to the world. So when I hear you,
yeah, I think it's just tricky because in our context, there's so much individualism and there's so much spiritual bypassing that I think people are critical of that. But I'm pretty much a true womanist. And so I'll just say, I go with what Harriet Tubman said. If you're truly getting free, you're going to care about getting other people free. So
correct.
These joy practices, these spiritual practices, these love practices, if they're not leading you to turn around and be more engaged, then I would say, yeah, it's just spiritual bypassing. It's just avoiding. Right. But the real work, true freedom requires you to work towards helping other people get free.
And I think what Carrie was pointing us to is that there are maybe multiple ways of approaching it. I know today, in my time of quietness, I was cultivating a compassion for people who have been silent regarding the genocide, because they're not all the same. Their mentalities are not all. Some people have, some people actually care. It matters to them, but they're just in a space in this moment where they are not going to mimic what my response may be, and I need to be in solidarity with them.
Yeah. There's so many ways, that, and going back to what you said, Carrie, about, there being lots of maybe factions or, I think it's always been that way. I think because of, the democratization of media, we are aware of more of those voices. But, when I taught MLK and Malcolm X, we would study those movements back in the 60s, and there were just as many factions. It's just the media didn't give voice to all of them. But, SCLC kids hated King and thought he was arrogant and didn't listen to that. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's the same now. We're just, I think, maybe a little more aware of the different voices and groups because everybody has a website and a Twitter handle.
Yes. Yeah. I think, to clarify what I was saying, to your point, I am all about being careful to not spiritually bypass. Not to say that I do that perfectly. I don't, but it's one of the key things that I talk about in my teaching. Right. And this idea of shaming people, to your point, and to your point, David, too, of shaming people if we're not embodying our activism in exactly the way that particular voice is approving of in that particular moment, and shaming somebody for practicing the deep-rooted connection with spirit that is required to do any kind of justice work. It doesn't make sense to me. It's something that I'm frustrated with, and I've been seeing it a lot lately. So it's been top of mind. So,
yeah. And I know we're out of time, but I want to close with this one last thing about the Black Madonna.
Yes, please do.
I can relate. I can resonate so much with what you're saying, Carrie, because, I have that impulse to shame others out of fear, as
do I.
Out of fear and entitlement. And I, at the end of the day, I think that if people just lived like I did, the world would be great, which it's not true. But I had a really interesting experience with the Black Madonna last spring. I ended up teaching a class with an organization that was, I agreed to do it out of fear. I was concerned about my income last year and said yes, even though my spirit was saying no. And it was a disaster. And it didn't pay in the end. But I was in this class teaching for 7 weeks, and I had all these white women. And there were several white women in the class who are pretty well-known Black Madonna teachers who signed up to basically be a gang against me in the class. And they would like actively they would actively challenge what I was saying in the chat, the Zoom chat. We had breakout groups, and I think this was the first time in the history of the organization that they had done this because it's a white organization. But I said I want there to be BIPOC affinity groups that people can join if they want to for the breakout groups. A bunch of white women every week would boycott the breakout groups because they didn't believe that there should be a BIPOC group. So just stuff like that. And some of these are like, I mean, like if you've read anything about the Black Madonna, like you've read these people, like they're like big Black Madonna names. So they have some clout as they're like trying to take me down in the class. And I was hurt. I was annoyed. I was angry. And also I was afraid. I was afraid that white people were always going to have the last word on the Black Madonna. And so I remember getting to the final session and talking really explicitly about the Black Madonna and how she is here for everyone, but she's a Black woman. And so she's here for Black women specifically. And one of these women, probably the most famous out of all of them, wrote in the chat, "I'm offended that you're saying that. Me as a rich white woman, I'm afraid, I'm ashamed that I'm offended that you're saying that Black Madonna is for poor and Black people because that doesn't include me and I feel excluded, right? And all this stuff." And so I was just like, let's just get through this session. I'll just be done with the class. So then soon afterwards, I went into my dance dream space because I was just like, I have so much energy and I just need to dance it out. And I was just dancing and screaming and crying and raging. And I was just like, talking to the Black Madonna. And I feel like she said to me, she was like, Christena, those women, they don't own me. And I was like, damn right. And then she was like, and neither do you. Ooh. And I was like, and then I just started crying and like, just like, damn it. No, right. Like I was trying to shame and judge people into seeing the divine in the world the way that I do. And like, maybe I have some good reasons and maybe I have some insight that I have access to that they don't, but it was completely from a place of fear and self-righteousness and a sense that I should have the final say on the Black Madonna, which is really arrogant, And so I think that's why those practices of connecting to the streams of love are so crucial because any of us can fall into that trap of, oh, you're celebrating a holiday, therefore you don't care about like world peace, or you're stuck in this way of looking at the Black Madonna, therefore you're trash. You have nothing to contribute, or and it's just, I think she comes so that we can heal from those things.
Like Kali, who severs our ego. Yes.
Same energy.
Wears it as a necklace.
Yes. And so I think, so I really, I mean, we all have work to do.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm making a list of what my homework. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Cleveland. It's been such an honor.
I know you'll let us know when you have a retreat for Black men.
I want just like Black folks.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many men would come. So
well, that I'm wondering too, honestly. I told you about my experience in Kojic and that's it's duplicated itself in multiple ways. So I wonder. But you know what? I do have hope.
I think
do
some would. I think some would. I mean, I know personally some men who've been like, I didn't know I needed this book, but I needed this book, you know? So, or I think in general, really, I have an ebook called Christ Our Black Mother Speaks. And that's the one that Black men, and it's about the 7 last words of Christ, but if Christ was a Black woman on a plantation. And so, there's that book. A lot of Black men have been like,
oh yeah,
I had
we do love our mamas.
Yeah, exactly. I've had several Black men who are just like, I feel like I've always believed that God is a Black woman because of my mom, and you gave me the theology for it.
Yes.
That's gorgeous.
So I do think, I just don't know if they would be like on a trip to Paris to visit the Black, but I do, yeah. But we'll see. Anyways.
Well, thank you again so much. It's been such an honor to have you.
Thanks. It's good to see you again, Pastor David. Please tell Miss Diane that I said hi.
I will do just that.
And also, Carrie, it's nice to meet you.
Same here. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to go join your Patreon right now. So,
please. I would be grateful.
Yes, awesome. Well, have a great day, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Christina.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at GodIsNotAnAsshole or text 805-703-8393 because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole.